So we are honored to have with us today Nela Wagman, Wagman, sorry.
That's okay.
Director of Come Find Me, and Tiffany, Conklin, producer on Forget Me Not. Now let's begin with your film, Come Find Me. What an imaginative film about a young girl grappling with an enormous trauma. How did this story come to you?
Well, it is in part autobiographical in that my family has a history of them that like that, although it's not completely autobiographical.
Can you speak a little closer?
Oh, okay. Did you guys hear what I just said, or shall I repeat myself? It is in part autobiographical, but not entirely.
And how did you arrive at the young girl having these fantastical experiences? Was that
You
something
mean the fantasy section?
Yeah,
Where she's talking about her
yeah. No, it's such a creative way to do her feelings, you know, and in a visual way too. You know,
Thank you. I don't know. Just, you know, I don't know. That's what I imagined. I suppose I ruminate on the scenario and think about what it feels like visually. Kind of what I came up with.
well, it was really beautiful, and I loved the box and revisiting it, and you know the wicker toy box. Yeah. And how did you find that amazing child actor? She was.
I have to say, she is phenomenal. Sophia, you know, it was really a kind of combination of luck and some research in terms of where I might post. I posted on Facebook, actually, and I posted in the county where I shot the film, as well as in New York City, where I am based. And a friend saw the post, and the friend had a daughter, and the daughter wasn't free, but her agent represented another child that this mother thought I should meet. And I met her, and she was just this little alert, really intelligent, very self-assured and committed to acting, and in the most natural, unaffected, uncute way, at least when required. I'm sure she can be very cute, but she really is a little laser beam.
You can really see her wheels turning while she's, you know, standing there. It's all how children can absorb everything that's going on around them. So wonderful film.
Thank you.
Wonderful film. Tiffany, what a poignant and important documentary as well. I love how Hilda's journey develops and evolves. You know, the mother doesn't just, she's a special ed teacher, but she is not committed to being an activist at the beginning of the film. And I love how that evolves through their journey. So tell us how you got involved in this project. You're the producer.
Yes, I'm the producer. Olivia would have loved to be here, the director, but Emilio's little sister is coming in any day now, so couldn't be here. Olivia is my business partner and old friend, and yeah, so obviously when this opportunity came to make this film from this grant from the Alana Foundation, we couldn't pass that up. Actually, the film, this is not the film we intended to make. It was going to be a film about what inclusion looks like all over the world. And our idea was to start the film with Emilio, and then, you know, in the middle you kind of check in with him, and at the end he goes to an inclusive setting. But given the way things unfolded, the whole film just completely changed, and there's a lot of stories there that we didn't even get to include. Like, we had a whole segment filmed in Kenya, like all this stuff, but you know, the films kind of take on a life of their own.
Yeah, well, I love the intimacy of this film. Actually, I'm very curious about when Olivier decided to start filming this, because you have that wonderful sequence where Hilda's just given birth, and the doctor is telling them that their child has Down syndrome.
Yeah.
And I know we spoke about this earlier, so why don't you recount how that came about? Because it's a pretty interesting
They
story.
did the test when she was pregnant to see if Emilio had Down syndrome or not, because you were able to get tested for that, and it didn't show up. So it wasn't until that moment, Olivia actually forgot that he had the camera hanging on his neck, and he captured everything, and he told me it took him about 2 years to even revisit that footage, because it was just such an intense moment. So, yeah, just as a filmmaker, he typically films everything in his life, and it was never meant to be such an intimate film. It was incredibly challenging for him to, one, share that part of his life, but also to, be editing all of that all day, and then go home and see Emilio like 2 years later in actual time. So it was quite a challenging experience. Yeah.
Well, there's so many just extraordinary families that you meet along the way in your film. I'm thinking of Wesley, Ada, Liam, the Henderson School, and then of course Sabrina, who aspires to be a professor. It's just really moving. And now, how did you get in contact with all these different families?
It involved a lot of research, and then just as you get to know people within this community, and I do have to state that this is 1/5 of the population, people with disabilities, so it's not a small group of people. But once you start talking with them, you see it from the film, everybody has to be an advocate. So it wasn't that difficult to get to know a lot of people, because recommendations come, and before you know it, there were just so many stories that we couldn't include, unfortunately. But we're hoping to create separate, smaller pieces to release after the film is released.
Yeah, that's wonderful. What's happening with Emilio's education now?
Emilio, like many families, he had to move out of New York to get the kind of education he wanted, and I think that their family is lucky and able to do that. Not all families are, so that's what they had to do, because it was just exhausting. Their battle was to just get him into pre-K. That's insane.
It's really quite shocking. It's really quite shocking, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Where did they end up? Did they go to the Henderson School?
They went
I love
to-
the Henderson School.
That would have been
amazing.
amazing. They went to Montclair, New Jersey. It's known for their education system, and our company is in New York, so it would have been difficult for him to go to Boston all the time.
Right. I also, I don't know if people in the audience have seen Crib Camp, but this is such a nice companion piece that's more about an earlier moment in the disabilities movement. And of course you have Judy Heumann, who is also featured in this film. And Tiffany, you mentioned that you have some more contact with Judy.
Yeah, Olivier spoke with her a week ago, I believe. We're going to have an impact campaign, a global impact campaign, just to make sure we get the word out there with enough educators and policymakers. So yeah, we were speaking with her last week, because it's kind of like a continuation of what happened after their battle and what it looks like today.
Absolutely. You sort of expected after that movie that things had really changed so much more, and yet, it hasn't, on the local levels. So I wanted to open the discussion up to the audiences. I'm sure they have some other questions. Why don't we so we have a roaming microphone. Are there any questions in the audience? Yes, up in the...
Thank you. The first film and the child actress, I'm wondering if you can speak about how you directed her, if at all. Did you kind of film over and over and then just find pieces that really showed the mood that you wanted, or did you actually give her verbal direction?
That's a great question. it's a special challenge to direct children, and my earlier career is and continues to be as a theater director, so I have actually directed children on stage as well, and what I find, and I think other film directors bear me out, the trick with kids is to give them physical instruction, not really mental interpretive instruction as you would with an adult actor. So really, and with other children, not so much with Sophia, I have often told them to, I give them a nonsense word and I'll say, walk over there, turn, say rattlestick, rattlestick, rattlestick in your head 12 times, and then come back. And what you get is a face full of thought. But what they're really doing is saying a nonsense word over and over in their head. Because children are so instinctive and they're so connected. I mean, an expressive child, you see everything that's going on, but if you tell them to think something or feel something, they'll want to show you because they want to please you. So then you'll get something very demonstrative and kind of acty and not natural. So generally with kids, if you give them something very specific to physically do, and they understand the context of the scene, and Sophia was particularly good at that. She understood the story very well, and she understood the gravity, and she understood, I think she really did, though we didn't discuss it, understand the emotional journey of the character and the kind of withdrawal. But we never talked about it. Her mother, she read the script. Her mother discussed, what had happened, so she understood the events of the story. But I don't think there was ever, on my part or her mother's part, and I can't vouch for that entirely, a discussion of the emotional trajectory. She just was there because that's how children are, and that's when children pretend. They're just there, and you don't have to explain it to them. They're just there, and I think a lot of times when you see child actors grow into not great teenage actors, it's because they're suddenly aware that they have to recreate something, whereas as children they're not aware that they have to recreate anything. They just create it. They just go there, and it's just an extraordinary process. And honestly, for a lot, for example, with the fantasy scene, I really just used heads and tails of the shots as much as I could, i.e. before I called action and after I called cut, when they just, and sometimes you can do that with regular actors, with adult actors, you get an extraordinary amount of natural behavior, which, if you edit it correctly, gives you exactly what you need.
Sounds like you get some pretty natural acting when you have the camera rolling on administrators in your film.
Oh my goodness, yeah. I don't know what,
Do you want to tell us a little bit about that?
Oh, I would love to know what their reaction is to the film. To be honest, I don't know. I'm just hoping that we don't hear it in lawsuits later.
I have a question.
Sure.
Was the administrator
Why don't you ask? Yeah.
Was the administrator who forgot to turn off her microphone, was she ever confronted with that footage? Does she know it exists?
I did write to the DOE and all the mayoral candidates, and we did publicly let people know that the film is being released, and it's up to them to see it. I think that it's really important that other parents and policymakers see it more than them, to be honest. But I do have some friends who are part of District 75, and they were incredibly shocked to see what really goes on. I think everybody's just trying to do their part, but they don't realize what's going on bigger, systemically, just beyond what they're able to see. So it was really important to redirect the film and show what this journey looked like for this couple who really just, it was just terrifying for them to see that their son was headed in this path regardless of what they believed or understood and where they stood. I mean,
and even what the teacher recommended,
Yeah.
which is so shocking. Do other people have questions for our filmmakers? Yes.
It draws up feelings of frustration, of anger, of realizing that in this day and age these things happen, and that it gets to be very political, and I think this movie is excellent and brings to the front for those of us who don't know what's happening, that maybe action can be taken.
So what you bring up just makes me think about the importance of, for us, this film was supposed to be something that made disabilities a topic that people can speak about. We feel like it's a topic that's very uncomfortable for a lot of people because they're just not around it enough or they don't know enough about it. And it's really important that this feels like it creates a safe space for people to just really ask questions and understand the personal side of it. So it was important that we didn't make it too heady and we just made it more about like, what do you feel like is going on here as a human being, you know? So, yeah, it was.
Yeah, I love the intimacy, and I think a lot of people don't see people with disabilities in their communities, and it really questions what kind of society we want to have, and it, you know, without films like this, we don't really tease out, you know, what that means, and yeah, so really remarkable. Other questions? How about slightly further up, and then we have one in the front.
I thought forgive me that, I thought the optics of the Lechmere village was so powerful and so well, so appropriately integrated with the movie. Were you aware of that facility before the movie was under? Did you seek it out?
That came out during the research actually, and it wasn't until later on that we realized that Emilio's test was the exact same test that Olivier picked up. So that was just part of the journey in making the film, to be honest.
We have one more question right here in front, and then we have to.
Well, maybe a question at a time, but it seems to me that the teachers and teachers union would be natural, hopefully advocates for change, and I'm wondering if that's at all a direction.
Absolutely. Teachers, educators, parents of typical children, and policymakers as our main audience. Is, you know, change doesn't happen in a vacuum, so it's really important that it starts with the people at the front line, but also everybody that doesn't feel like they have anything to do with it. I mean, they're just as big a part.
Well, thank you both. This is
I just wanted to comment. I wanted to thank you for having both of our films here, obviously, but I'm so moved by your film, and it reminds me too, it brings home the point that inclusion is so very important in terms of what kind of society you want to make. But also that this festival has brought in the film Best Summer Ever, for example, which is sort of unnaturally inclusive, but gives us such a strong sense of what our world does in fact look like, and the way we ought to feel about the community of disabilities and the importance of integration, and where that's a fantasy and a happy and joyous fantasy that we can believe in, and your film provides a solution that we can now pursue in order to create a fantasy world that becomes a reality, much the way that film, which brings so much joy. So I'm very excited and I'm very honored to be in a festival that cares so deeply about the life of children and the development of children into their adulthood, because my film, your film, that film really speak to the need of taking the child's experience and perspective seriously, because of course the world we live in is full of adults who all were once children.
Right. Well, thank you.
Just before we go, I'm sorry, I didn't want everybody to know, I don't know if it was mentioned before, but perhaps it was, that Forget Me Not won the Hernandez Bayless Prize for the feature film that best captures the triumph of the human spirit. And for all those who saw this today, I think you would agree this is the most deserving recipient of this award. Thank you.
I just want to say thank you all for taking the time to watch the film, and thank you for creating this space for filmmakers. It's so important for us independent filmmakers, so thank you.
Thank you.